So welcome back to Fighting the Burnout. Today we have Patrick Fitz. Oh, I'm going to pronounce this wrong. I know it. Fitz. Where is it? Fitzgibbons.
There you go.
Perfect. Okay, cool. So we have Patrick Fitzgibbons on the show today, Fighting the Burnout. He's a retired U.S. police officer. Don't actually know where exactly it was, but I'm sure you'll tell us. Of about 23 years. He runs the number one criminal justice podcast. It is absolutely awesome. I listened to an episode earlier on, and it was pretty informational. It's interesting seeing it from a different country on things. But yeah, so he's got MBA and business and MA in organized leadership. Yeah, how about this, Patrick? I'll let you tell me all about yourself because it's easier than trying to read it off your bio.
Well, Chris, thanks for having me on your show, man. And again, my name is Pat Fitzgibbons, 23-year veteran in law enforcement. Started out as a patrol officer, like many of us do, worked my way up through the ranks and retired as a operations commander. I had a great career, but there were periods in my law enforcement career where I was burned out. I'm sure we're going to talk about that. I'm also ex-military. I was airborne infantry in the Army down at Fort Bragg in North Carolina with the 82nd Airborne. And retiring or love retirement. Like you said, I have a good podcast called CJ Evolution and started that almost 4 years ago and about 352 episodes deep. And love it, brother. And I teach and do other things on the side, but I'm glad to be here on your show. I appreciate it.
Awesome, man. I appreciate you being here as well. It's awesome to talk to us, especially other law enforcement guys, military, because we're put into some of the highest stress situations.
Yeah.
You can think of. So tell me, Pat, what would you define for you burnout as?
I just think burnout. I mean, there's many definitions probably, but it's just a lack of resources. Lack of energy, lack of motivation. I mean, there's different. I think there's a lot of different definitions, but my definition is just lack of fuel, lack of motivation, excitement, passion, all those things go into what I consider is, burnout. If you get to that point where you don't have the motivation, the passion, the fuel, the energy, to keep going. So that would be my definition of burnout. And there were several times in my career where I was there.
Yeah. So tell us about some of those. What that looked like for you so that others can, get an idea of maybe they're actually feeling it, but not knowing it. They're like, what's going on for me right now? Why do I not have that passion to get out of bed? Whatever they're doing, especially in law enforcement, I know it happens all the time. Military, it even happens all front line, staff, especially in these times right now with coronavirus going on. I can imagine the burnout and, emergency services just going through the roof. So what did that look like for you?
Well, I mean, it looked like for me throughout my career is, like you just said, Chris, I mean, I didn't want to get out of bed, by the time I did get out of bed, throw my uniform on and go to the office. I mean, I didn't want to go to the office. I dreaded going into the office, what pile of, what's going to await me when I get in there. So yeah, I mean, it affects everything. It affects your morale. It affects your appetite. It affects your motivation. Like I said, I quit working out.
Yeah.
Quit taking care of myself, started drinking more. Everything started to suffer, relationships, my marriage, relationships with the kids. So I think everybody's different, but that's what I experienced when I started going through burnout was all those different factors and, probably depression too, to some degree for me, where I was just depressed and I was like, my heart wasn't in it. And that, there's just a culmination of things. I don't just think it was one thing. So that's what I felt like when I was going through it.
Yeah, no, I can fully relate to that. I felt the same thing. It does feel like what people describe as depression, and like the deeper you get into it, the deeper you actually will get depressed from it as well.
Oh yeah.
I got depressed from it because I was just so drained.
Yeah.
After myself, like you said. So what was it that turned the tables? You're there, you're feeling burned out. Not really. Did you know what was going on, or was it just kind of like I just don't feel like going to work?
Well, I mean, I think I knew what was going on. I mean, I think that's the first thing I think people that are going through burnout is or feeling certain ways is you got to, you got to reflect, you got to do some soul searching and dig deep to figure out what's going on. And if it's, for me, there were periods where I didn't like my job. And so that's, that contributed to the burnout. And, we all see, we see a bunch of stuff in law enforcement that affects you. And so for me, it was just getting to that point where, okay, I'm reflecting and doing some soul searching and saying, all right, what do I want to do? Do I want to stay down this path, or do I want to change course? So I think it starts with really having an honest discussion with oneself and knowing oneself a little bit better, and then deciding, okay, can I get past this? Can I move on? Can I do things that'll make my life better, make my motivation better, get me out of this burnout and keep me motivated to keep going to work? Or do I need to make a change? And I stayed, I chose to, to stay in law enforcement, and I started, changing my mindset. I started hanging out with people that were outside of law enforcement, which I think is key to any cop. I think you got to hang out with other people besides cop. And I tell that to people all the time, students and people I talk to. And that's not a dig on law enforcement, but there's a lot of negativity in law enforcement. You know that, Chris. And I think I think when you hang around with nothing but cops, that's all you're going to hear is negativity, and the world sucks and people sucks, and that kind of feeds into the burnout.
Yeah. I mean, I know when I was at what we call it police college here, I know in the States it's called academy, but they go, yeah, you got to keep those friends outside. And I know for me it was hard because I'm from California. I didn't have a lot of friends here. I became really good friends with cops that I was at college with, and they're like, yeah, you got to keep that stuff. And I was like, how the hell do I do that without having no friends outside? And then I was like, I can't relate to them. So yeah, but it is key. Like, that's what I realized afterwards. I was like, holy cow, all the negativity, because that's all cops talk about is what they see and do and deal with. And they don't actually, for some reason, and tell me what your thoughts are on this, for some reason, they don't see the good in what they're doing after a short time. I've pinpointed it to for me, it was around about a year.
Mm-hmm.
Stop seeing the good in what you're doing. Staying focused on the good. Like, you still see it, but you lose a lot of people lose the focus. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think, and I went through that, and I know a lot of cops that go through it. And I think what happens is, we all get into law enforcement with a certain expectation, at least I did. And, thinking of, the bad guys are always going to go to jail or do prison time and stuff like that. And cases are always going to, if I put a lot of hard work into a case, it's not going to get thrown out. There's not going to be mistakes. And I think the more you mature in the profession, and the more that you go on with it, you're going to get disappointed, because there are going to be plea deals, and there's going to be cases that get thrown out, that things that are out of your control. And I think for a lot of young officers, you become disillusioned. You think it's going to be one way, and then you get in and you realize, oh, this is the real world. And I think that goes into what we're talking about with burnout, and you become, jaded. Not everybody, but I know I did. And I was like, well, wait a minute. I busted my ass with this case, and now the guy's getting a plea bargain. He's not doing a day in jail or prison or whatever. So I think, that can be, like I said, quite frustrating. And I think that could lead to burnout, but you got to keep a positive attitude. And that's the key, is you got to keep going. So.
Yeah. So what have you learned over, obviously, lots of years? How long were you in the military for?
4 years. Yeah.
4 years. So you've got like 27 years of, that kind of high intensity stuff. What have you learned over the years to overcome and prevent yourself from experiencing, what you described as burnout?
Well, I think for me, great question, Chris, is for me, I learned that you got to surround yourself with the right people. We just talked about it, and again, I'm not saying not hanging around with cops or hanging out with cops is a bad thing. I'm just saying you got to expand your network, and you got to, for me, it was, kind of trusting, other people. And that's hard to do, and that really helped me tremendously, because I think, and I can't speak for you or anybody else, but I was groomed as a young cop. If you don't have a badge or a star, you're one of them. You can't trust those people. But the older I got, and with the help of my wife, she started, she worked on me for a while. And she said, you got to, meet other people outside of law enforcement. And the moment I did, it really, really kind of changed the way I viewed the world. And it's not that I don't, let my guard down. I still have that guard up sometimes, but I go out and I have friends that have nothing to do with law enforcement. So I think that's a big part of it. For me, it's meditation. I
Yep.
mean, I love meditating. I start each day and, gratitude, which I think is important. I think that changed my life tremendously. I know as officers, and again, I was there where, life sucked. I hated life. I hated, going to work, people suck, all this. And then when I started kind of shifting my mindset and really started being grateful for the things I have in my life, that really was a game changer for me. So I tell people all the time, before my feet even hit the floor, I just take a few moments and, start going through my mind what I'm grateful for. As a matter
Yeah.
of fact, I did a show today on gratefulness. And so those things, listening to podcasts, Tony Robbins, Gary V, all these big names that I started listening to, I was like, uplifting, and positive and motivational. I think that helped me too, kind of change my mindset. So those kind of things, and it takes a while. It's not like a light switch.
Oh.
The more you do it, the more I think, and for me, it really, really kind of changed my mindset and helped me with burnout. And that's what probably kept me in the game as long as I was in it. And I retired on a high note, and I wasn't burned out, but I wanted to do other things. So
Yeah. No, that's awesome. Yeah, that's some good insight. It's literally, you nailed it I believe you nailed it on the head there, because since I left the job, that's what I've worked on. And like literally this last year, especially, I've been out about 2.5 years now. And this last year, especially, I've been doing that same thing, wake up before I even do anything, like my eyes open. I'm like, what am I grateful for? What are the three things I'm grateful for? Because it just primes you into that spot before you look at the Russian roulette of your phone and, what could be there. And mindset, like you said, listen.
Yeah, it's so important, man. It is so important. And like I said, I would encourage people to, like I said, I mean, like we were talking before we started, go to seminars, go out there, meet with people, network, because those same people, when you leave law enforcement, you're going to need people on the outside. So if you're one of those people that hates civilians, well, guess what? You're going to be a civilian one of these days, and you're going to need, the people that you don't want to hang out with, or some of them, to kind of help you with another career, because we're all living longer, at least most of us. And we have second, third, and fourth careers.
That's great advice. I mean, I like what we were talking before we started recording. I did my protection services here. I met some amazing people, and my thing, because I had it in my head that I didn't like people, and that everybody was, if you weren't a cop, I didn't care about. I lost those connections, and I didn't focus on them, and so like I'd had high end, politicians, business people that I met that were like, oh, if you ever need anything. Never went with any of it, and don't have any of those contact details. So it is very important, as well as it keeps you grounded to the real world, like you said.
Yeah. You need to stay. One thing I learned, a while ago, Chris, is I think we're conditioned a lot to say no. You need to condition yourself, especially when you're making a transition, or you want to do a change, or even anything. New people, you need to start saying yes more. Because those are going to open up doors. Don't say no automatically. Be open to what people have to say. Now, as cops, I think our radar is always up. Somebody's trying to scam us or something like that. But at least be open to listening to people and learn how to say yes more, because that's going to open more doors for you.
This is what I tell a lot of people, especially my clients, is I'm like, okay, as a cop, you're going to have that alert level that's going to be higher than a normal civilian. But you also are trained to investigate things.
Yeah.
To listen to people, take what you want. I got taught this actually when I was sailing around the world with my parents. As I was like, on these yachts, racing, working, racing on multi-million-dollar, really fast yachts. And I was like, I don't agree with what these guys are saying around the sailing that. My mom and dad turned to me and they go, Chris, take what you believe is going to work. Remember the rest of it, but take what you believe is going to work. Try it. If it doesn't work, then try some of their stuff.
Yeah. It's great advice.
That's what I do now, and I lost that when I was in law enforcement. But it's exactly the same thing with with everybody. It's like listen to it, and at least give it a go of some of it. If you really don't believe in something that's against your values, then don't do it. But if it,
I mean, just like you said, just keep that open mind, man. Especially, and that's the one thing that I had a closed mind, when I was younger, but and usually with some people, it's the opposite. They get more closed-minded when they get older, but the more older I get, the more open-minded I get. And I'm like, well, shit, maybe I should try that. Oh, I didn't mean to. Am we allowed to cuss on this? I dropped
Yeah. I swear like a trooper a lot of the time.
But yeah, I mean, you just got to have an open mind, man, and be open to new things. And like I said, we're not here, when you really think about it, we're not here for a long period of time. So you might as well make the most of it and try new things, meet new people, and that's really gonna help you with burnout. I mean, it really will, as well as advance your career. And when you get out of law enforcement, like you and I have, it's gonna help you, man. It's gonna, to open more doors for you. So.
Definitely. Yeah. I mean, we get trained in some crazy, awesome things, and it sets us up to be able to do amazing things, especially
Yeah.
we're out. I've
Yeah.
talked to business people, and they're like, I'd much rather hire a cop that doesn't know much about my industry than hire a civilian that knows a lot about it, because I can trust the cop.
Well, because we're disciplined. I'm not saying that civilians aren't, but we're used to that paramilitary environment. We're used to taking orders, and we're highly disciplined. Not that other people aren't, but yeah, I agree. I mean, just cops are just are a rare breed. We're a good breed, and so yeah, a lot of people want to hire us, which is awesome.
I also want to, a little bit ago you said about your wife helping you through everything. I want to praise our spouses and our partners.
Oh yeah.
Fuck, man, they take a beating sometimes.
Oh yeah.
And they stand right there and they pull you through it, and they recognize things that are changing you. I know if it wasn't for my wife, I'd probably still be in that dark hole.
Well, I was going to say, I mean, I could say the same thing. I mean, she's the one that really kind of, like I said, I told you that story in your audience is, she was like, all right, enough of this shit. We're going to go out and meet people. And she's awesome because she doesn't have any affiliation with law enforcement. Yeah. And she's a realtor, but she, has just a ton of friends, and slowly she wore me down. I'm glad she did, where I started, going out, meeting all, her friends and their husbands. And I'm like, oh, these people are awesome, man. And so it really, really, I mean, people listening might think that, oh, that's not big deal. Yeah, it is a big deal. At least for me, it made all the difference in the world as far as my attitude and helping me with burnout and stuff like that. Because, in law enforcement, Chris, this, and so your listeners too, we only deal with like the 10%. And then most people are good out there. I know it took me a long time to realize that, but most people are. It's only that slim percentage of people that we're constantly dealing with. So it kind of skews our world, our perception of things. So.
Yeah. As Tony says, obviously you're a Tony fan. Tony says, what you focus on is what you get. So, law enforcement, we're naturally forced to focus on the bottom 10% of society all the time.
Yeah.
When there's
exactly
90% out there that we need to constantly keep shifting.
Yeah. And for the people who are, burned out there and just are negative and pissed off at life, I would offer you something else. And some of you might have heard of the law of attraction, and I'm a firm believer in the law of attraction, meaning what you put out there as far as energy goes, that's what you're going to get in return. If you're constantly negative and this sucks and, I don't want to go to work or whatever, that's what life's going to give you. That's what the energy, the energy you're sending out, that's what you're going to get back in return. Yeah. And I used to think, if you would have told me this like fucking 5 years ago, Chris, I would have been like, you're crazy, man. This shit. But it is so true. I mean, it is really so true. As what you put out there, you're going to get back. Yep. And I would challenge your listeners to really take this and, put it into action and, think about it. You can control what's between your head most of the time. And again, we're all energy. So whatever you put out, you're going to get back. Yep. I didn't believe that years ago, but I do. I'm a firm believer in it now.
If you had told me that even just a few years ago, I listened to Tony back when I was like 16 or 17. I think it was like 7 Days to Power or something. It was one of his audio tapes. My mom bought it for me. And so I kind of had that stuff in the back of my head. But if you had even said that to me like 2-3 years ago, I would have been like, what the fuck are you on?
Yeah. Well, and it's so important, as far as first responders too, man. I mean, we see so much crap and we see some good sometimes, but it's really important that you focus on the good too. And, you can't just focus on the bad. And that's why I was talking about, who are your, Jim Rohn says, you're the average of the 5 people you associate with. So who are the 5 people? I always 2 people when I go or ask people, when I go talk to people, do a people inventory. I know that sounds kind of, maybe it sounds bad to some people, but that is so true. Do a people inventory, or like Brad Lee says, sometimes you got to weed your garden, get the weeds out, meaning the toxic people in your life.
Yep.
And I guarantee you, if you get rid of the toxic people in your life or stop associating with, because sometimes they're family, but you can love your family, you just don't have to hang around with them all the time. But I guarantee you, if you stop associating with the toxic people, if you're burned out, they're not helping you. And if you get rid of the toxic people, maybe that's going to help with your burnout.
Yeah, definitely. So you said, I'm going to get this wrong, I know it, but you said you were commander before you left? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So obviously you had a lot of people working underneath you in the police. Mm-hmm. What would you say to like the other commanders, the chiefs, the sergeants? I know in the States it's lieutenants, here it's like senior sergeants. What would you say to them to help their staff, to prevent them, the staff going through burnout? Because, as we know, a lot of the staff, and, when you're a patrol officer, you're front line, you look up and you go, fuck, they just don't even know anything about what we're doing. Why are we going and doing this? We don't need to be here. We need to be here. What would you say to them to be able to help their staff, especially those young guys just coming out of, academy or college, or even, for your corporate world, to help their staff prevent, going through burnout?
Well, I think first and foremost is getting to know your people. I made it a habit of, going and meeting with my sergeants on a weekly basis, and meeting with the corporals. So that's how it was structured in my department. And the patrol officers too, I'd sit in on briefings all the time, and I'd meet with and I worked in a smaller agency, so it was more feasible for me. So I think you have to know your people. You have to know their strengths, their weaknesses, know about their families. I think there's so many people out there that don't do that. They just legislate and they just manage from a desk. I used to ride along with my sergeants, and get to know them. Like I said, first line supervisors. And I think that's important. You have to know your people. If you don't know your people, there's a problem there. Yeah. Because once you start if you better know your people, you're going to know what their concerns are, and what they're dealing with. I remember I had a sergeant come into my office early on when I was promoted, and I felt like crap because he came in, and he was a good friend of mine. We went through the ranks together, and I've known him for years. And I said, how are things going, man? How's your wife? He said, well, Commander, I got divorced like a year ago. And I was like, holy shit. I mean, I didn't even, and that was me not knowing my people well enough. So I think, again, first and foremost, you have to know your people, get to know them, talk to them, when you know what they're going through and what their needs and wants are, then you can better mitigate things like stress, burnout. But if you don't know them, that's the biggest thing. If you don't know them that well, you're not going to see the signs of stress and burnout and things like that. So that'd be I know it's simplistic, but that's so important that the higher ups need to know, the people that are working below them.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I can see, yeah, because then your patrol guys or your troops, they actually feel like they're connected to you, and
exactly
they actually come to you if they have an issue or they have something going on that they want to talk to you about.
And there was a study by the IACP a couple of years ago that talked exactly about that, where, a lot of departments, a lot of troops and agencies feel a disconnect with the higher ups because the higher ups don't take the time to get to know their people. Yeah. And I'm not saying that's a cure to everything. I'm just saying that, when you get to know your people, that's your most important asset, man, your human capital. And in a time where people are not flocking to law enforcement like they did before, where retention issues are all around the country. People are leaving law enforcement for obvious reasons. So we need to do what we can to help mitigate that and get to know our people and care for them and take care of them better.
Yeah, no, I can fully, I would say that's a huge one. All right, so obviously, you're out of the police now. You're doing your podcast. You're retired. Let's look back at when you were in. What was it that kept you going through all those easy and those hard times to stay in law enforcement for 23 years? Because it's a decent, lengthy career. I know here in New Zealand, we got told by a area commander that our attrition rate's now like at 2 years. When I joined, it was at 7. And I don't know what it is over there, the average in the U.S. But yeah, so because I'm a huge why guy, I like to know the why. I know the why of what I do now. But what would you say your why was then? That kept you going through those the easy and hard times. or even?
Well, I think for me is I mean, the obvious is I had a young family. I had to provide for a young family. And again, I think the things that I worried about, the older I got, Chris, the things that I worried about, I was slowly realizing that, and this is applicable to everybody, the things that I worry about rarely come to fruition. That's true with most people, and if they do come to fruition, they're usually much smaller than we envisioned them in our minds. So once I started to realize that the things I dreaded and worried about the most, a lot of times they never came true. Then that helped me, through those periods of time. And again, I mentioned too, there was a period of time where I didn't take care of myself, and then I started working out more, started eating better, meditating and doing all that stuff I talked about before. So those helped me through, those periods where I felt like giving up and throwing in the towel. And you said something really profound, and I believe in it too, is you really need to, and for anybody out there, you really need to figure out your why. I mean, that's a question that's being asked more and more, especially nowadays, what we're going through now with the coronavirus, is what's your why? I mean, why are you doing what you're doing? I'm a firm believer, Chris, that if you're doing police work or whatever you're doing out there just for a paycheck, that's not a good enough reason. You can't do it just for the paycheck. No. Shit, you can go get another job and get another paycheck. Yeah. There has to be deeper meanings, because so many people fall into that trap. And I was there years ago where I mentioned, I have a family, stayed with it. But as time went on, I slowly realized that, it's not so much about the money, it's your fulfillment. And that's what it really has to be. You're passionate about it and you really want to be there, because I hear that all the time. Well, the money, well, bullshit. You can go get another job. Don't make it about the money.
It's like, I absolutely, I don't say hate very often. Even my wife, I'm like, hate's such a strong word. I always say to her, I actually hate it when people, because I ask it all the time, helping people get into the police. I ask them, why do you want to join the police? And it's actually one of the tools that I get them to use to get them to push harder in their fitness. And I go, why do you want to join the police? And 99.9% of people say, I want to help people and I want to help the community. Mm-hmm. I go, that's such a bullshit reason.
Yeah.
You can go down to the local, anywhere.
Well, that's a canned answer that people are trained to do.
Yeah, and so literally I get people, and literally when you dig deep enough into it, you realize so many deep things. Like you'll go through, I do this 7 layers deep thing that I learned actually from Dean Graziosi to figure it out. Mm-hmm. And you just keep asking yourself why it's important. And you just take what you answered the time before and you go to the next one. Why is it important? Why is it important? And you keep digging. And the randomest things come out. Like I had one client who hers was I don't want to abandon people like my dad abandoned me.
Okay.
And that was why she wanted to join the police.
Okay. and people's whys are different.
I know, and they're totally different. I do what I do because I don't want anybody else to experience what I did.
Yeah.
In the police. And so it is an interesting thing, but like you said, the why is so important, isn't it?
Well, yeah, it's so important. And people, ask me too, well, how did you do this? How did you start, something like a podcast, or how did you write a book, or how are you doing this? And I said, dude, once you figure out the why, the how is much easier. Don't get wrapped up in the how. Once you have the drive and you're laser focused on your why, the how is going to come, man. I mean, it's going to come, but it's trying to figure out what that why is.
You'll figure out that how because you have so much passion,
Exactly. And you're naturally going to go to that. Yeah. And you will figure it out, especially now, we're talking about like a podcast or something, whatever you want to do. We have so much technology at our fingertips, so much things that I didn't have when I was younger. You're going to be able to figure it out. And now where we're all connected with the internet and everything, if you don't know, get online, dude, find a mentor. You don't have to have somebody standing right in front of you. Mm-hmm. I mean, there's so much information out there. Now you got to make sure you're, taking in good information because there's a lot of garbage out there, but there's no excuse anymore to not be able to figure out how to do stuff or figure out your why, because there's so many tools out there for you to do that.
Yeah. No, that was going to be my next question for you. How do you recommend for somebody to figure out, if they don't know what their why is, how to actually figure it out?
Yeah. Like I said, I mean, there's so many, I would, get into mastermind groups. I would get into networking, groups and things like that, reach out to people. And so many people out there, Chris, there's a lot of people that are just willing to just share content and share information with, I mean, all you have to do is ask, but I think a lot of people get freaked out. Oh, I don't want to ask this person, I don't want to ask. And there's a way to do it. You don't want to come across as, what can you do for me? You got to provide people value first. What can I do for you? But there's so many, groups you can join. There's so many people out there that you can reach out to, man. There's no gatekeepers anymore. You don't have to go through a secretary or anything like that. So when I want people to come on my show, or I say, hey man, that person would be a great guest, dude, I reach out to them usually through social media or whatever their, platform is. And I say, hey man, I love what you're doing. I think it'd be a great value. I'd love for you to come on the show. And 9 times out of 10, they'll say yes. Now this isn't about me. I'm just telling people how they can, kind of move the needle in their direction that they want to go with kind of reaching out to people and just networking with people. Because now, especially when we're all homebound now, for at least for the time being, you should be building that right now, man, and building your network.
Yeah, definitely.
So
definitely on that one. So if somebody's wanting, what would you say for law enforcement, because obviously we're ex-law enforcement, what would be your number one piece of advice for listeners who are, when it comes to, when they're getting into law enforcement, so they have a long career like you did?
I would say align yourself with the right people in your agency. In every agency, Chris, there's knuckleheads, there's people you want to stay away from. So seek out the people that are really going to take you under their wing. And, FTOs are very important. We call them field training officers here. The people who are going to help you train and get you, up to speed with, how to act or how to be out there as a solo officer. And, align yourself with the right people. And that applies to any business. But there's a lot of people in law enforcement. Well, I don't know about a lot, but there's people that shouldn't be there in every organization. So stay away from those people and get hooked up with the people that are motivated, excited to be there. Those are the people that are going to really, really help you in the down times, in the dark times, and when you feel like quitting or throwing in and you get burned out. Those are the people that are going to, help you through the rough times. So that'd be my best piece of advice is, align yourself with the right people. Stay away from the wrong.
All right, awesome. That's some real good advice. Yeah, real good advice. So Pat, if somebody's looking for your information, looking for your podcast, looking to get in touch with you for some coaching or anything like that, or even just, ask you a question, how do they find you?
They can go to my website, brother. It's cjevolution.com. That's cjevolution.com. It has all my podcasts on there. It has my coaching stuff, speaking stuff, even though I'm not doing a lot of speaking nowadays. But and network with me, man. I mean, that's how we have some mutual friends like we were talking about before. Yeah. And reach out to me, man, on social media. I'd love to hear from you. You can find me on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn a lot, so that's probably the best way to get me. But cjevolution.com. That's the website, and everything's there.
cjevolution.com. Awesome. So last question I have for you. What would be your one piece of advice for viewers to help them prevent or counter burnout?
Take care of yourself. And that just, that goes mentally, spiritually, and physically. Take care of yourself, man. I mean, don't let yourself, I mentioned before, how I stopped taking care of myself, started eating junk food, was hitting the bottle a little bit too much. I was. Just take care of yourself, man. It's a tough job. And, Chris, it's always funny to see those cops, and, that are brand new. They're all, and then after a couple of years, they're all, fucking, I ain't going to go to the gym. Take care of yourself. Like I said, and that means, I talk to people, I work graveyard shift or I work at night. Well, pack a fucking lunch, man. Do some prep work. I mean, do the stuff that you need to do, but take care of yourself. That old analogy, Chris, you're in a plane, the oxygen mask falls down. What do they say? Put it on yourself first before you put it on anybody else. Nope. Got to take care of yourself. So that's it's simplistic, but it's so true. You got to take care of yourself first.
Awesome, man. Cool. Well, thanks for being on the show. And
of course, brother, anytime.
And so for all you viewers out there, if you haven't listened to any of the previous episodes, there's a lot of really good ones from entrepreneurs, from business people, from ex-police officers as well. And we do our best to launch a new episode every Friday morning, New Zealand time, which is Thursday in the US. We're here. If anybody has anybody that they want to hear from, send us a message, let us know, put a comment in, and make sure you subscribe and follow us along, and get some great advice on making sure that you either don't go through burnout or how to get yourself out of it.